right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Liz. I am the head of impact and sustainability at Enjinstarter and also the founder of Intent Capital Group, which is my family office, and we invest in impact across all assets. But today, I am very honored to be on stage with these esteemed panelists to talk about decentralized solutions for climate action, Web3's role in environmental sustainability. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction for each of you. So Dr. Simon Schillebeeckx, I always have a problem. Simon is the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Handprint, a regeneration as service platform that helps companies grow by integrating and automating regeneration into their daily business processes. Simon also co-founded the Global Mangrove Trust, a nonprofit working on large-scale mangrove restoration and conservation. We also have Dr. Victor Tay, Group CEO of RHD Consulting. He's also the CEO of China ASEAN Business Alliance, also the CEO of Global Catalyst Advisory and Managing Director of Stout Asia Investment Banking Group. He was awarded the most influential sustainable business CEO in Southeast Asia. So very honored to be on stage with you. And we also have Marcus, whom I have the pleasure of sharing the stage a second time today because we were on a panel earlier this morning. He's a contributor from KlimaDAO, which is one of the first climate projects in Web3, in case you don't know. Marcus is a data-driven generalist focused on scaling climate action. So good afternoon, gentlemen. So as you all know, climate change, and I say this often, is the defining crisis of our time, right? And despite current efforts to reach net zero, we're still very, very far from achieving these targets necessary to reduce temperatures. And overall meaningful climate action also requires large-scale capital flow into verifiable, high-quality decarbonization projects. But still, right, as we all know, there are a lot of challenges in the market today, things like transparency, credibility, coordination, market inefficiencies, for all this to happen at scale. So what I really want to talk about today is, the potential, and since this is Web3 matters, of course, the potential of Web3 technology and decentralization in scaling up some of these solutions for climate change. So I'm going to start with Simon, because Simon's a very prolific author and he's written a lot about this. Can you introduce Handprint and share your thoughts on how you see Web3 being relevant or playing a part in scaling up climate action?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Handprint, in a couple of words, is just a platform that enables companies to capture value from doing something good in the world. And so we've curated, digitized, and improved the reporting capacity of hundreds of nonprofit organizations and charities, as well as social enterprises. And we make contributions to them accessible on a platform and then allow companies to integrate and embed these positive impact contributions into their daily processes. So that could be e-commerce, that could be advertising, and I'll talk about that later. That could be bank card transactions, could be ride hailing, it could be contracting, like any kind of action that has a digital fingerprint can be turned into a handprint. Now, at the moment, and this is why I shouldn't be on stage here, Handprint doesn't really use blockchain. Now, we are in conversations with a variety of organizations that could potentially help us solve a couple of the critical challenges that we see are really important in the impact space in general, way beyond climate, I would say. Because we talk a lot about climate, but there is an entire impact space behind this that also needs urgent attention, and that arguably, if you look at biodiversity collapse, is much more threatening to human survival than climate change. So I'll just give two thoughts on the potential for kind of blockchain specifically in this space. Improving data access, transparency, exchangeability, portability is all going to be very important in the climate space and in nature space in general. But it all comes down to what level of quality of data do you put on the blockchain? Because once you put something on the blockchain, it adopts this gospel-like quality that it's supposed to be true, which is obviously nonsense, because it's only true if what you put on the blockchain is inherently true to begin with. And so solving the on-chaining problem, the oracleization, in a way that is trustless and in a way that is scalable is challenge number one. I think before anything else, blockchain is going to be useless if we don't solve this problem in the impact space. The second thing to really start thinking much more deeply about, and there is an incredible paucity of attention to this, is how do we facilitate the alignment of on-chain and off-chain governance infrastructure across blockchain types? Because as long as we expect that some kind of impact, whether it's a carbon credit or something else, will only live on one blockchain, we're not going to solve any serious problems. So we need to create interoperability and compatibility between different blockchains. Now, at a technological level, that is actually pretty straightforward. But at a governance level, this is extremely difficult, because the rules that govern communities of blockchains, the rules that govern Ethereum or the rules that govern Solana are, if at all defined, unknown to most people who are members of the community. And even the hard-coded logics that exist on the blockchain can be fundamentally different. And we need a lot more work on that level, or that kind of abstract level of how are these communities organizing themselves and how are they able to make decisions and make sure that these things are inherently compatible. Because one of the studies that I've been doing as an academic really shows that there is so much conflict there, and it creates a big breakdown of trust for which ordinarily blockchain should be very good.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I always love hearing Simon's perspectives. So can the blockchain actually solve this, or maybe it could be more obfuscation because of multiple chains? Actually, Marcus would be a great person to talk about this and the work at KlimaDAO, because I understand that part of KlimaDAO's purpose is to make the market more efficient. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, the complexity of different blockchains hosting different assets is abstracted away from the end user, because ultimately what carbon markets and more generally impact markets are about is connecting people who have money and want to support impact with the projects on the ground doing the impact in a verifiable way, so the buyer knows what they're getting. The role of any particular blockchain differs depending on what side of the market we're applying this technology to. And I think there are opportunities on both the supply side and the demand side of impact markets like carbon credits for blockchain to play a role. At Klima, we're really focused on demand side issues, but there are lots of other projects in the space that we're partnering with who are tackling the supply side. Just to give a little context for what the current demand side of the carbon market looks like, if you want to support carbon removal or avoidance, historically you would get on the phone with a broker, you'd go back and forth over email, get some quotes, maybe shop around a bit, and 3 to 6 weeks later you'd get a PDF in your inbox saying that you retired X number of tons for a particular project. So it's quite old school, and there's a lot of room for improvement. And so while in an ideal world there's a lot of problems to solve, there are some very short-term, low-hanging fruit issues that can be addressed using existing technology today. So at KlimaDAO, we used the power of tokenization to bring some of these existing credits onto a blockchain, in our case, the Polygon blockchain. And we built a market around these so that they can now be bought and sold freely. And anybody who wants to buy as small as half a ton all the way up to thousands or hundreds of thousands of tons can do so freely with minimal slippage. And so really what we've done is opened up the market to a much wider array of participants. There's no need to get on the phone. And instead of getting an email in your inbox, you get a verifiable record that you can share on social media with a unique link that ties your activity to the particular project that you supported. So I agree there are a lot of there are broad problems to solve, but there are also near-term opportunities that blockchain represents to address some of the pressing issues in the current state of the market, even in absence of an ideal solution, which is going to take longer to get to.
Thank you. But just on that point, right? How does KlimaDAO actually resolve that problem when something's retired on the Polygon chain, which Simon was talking about? How do you ensure that it isn't doubly sold or retired on another chain?
Yeah, so, well, I guess there's two questions there. There's the question of the original assets that we offer on our platform, CarbonMark. The original assets were created off-chain by a registry called Vera. We're working to onboard more registries as well. But so there's one question of how do you make sure that the off-chain asset, once it's brought on-chain, is only used once.
Correct.
And at that level, the bridging technology that our partners use to create the on-chain asset creates a one-to-one mapping between the off-chain destroyed asset and the on-chain asset that's created. And so you can easily inspect by following the chain of custody back to the original bridging event and make sure that the credit you retired was only bridged once. Now, if you have credits floating across multiple chains, there is a need for bridges to create those one-to-one representations and make sure that, any particular credit is only retired once. So as an example, we built some cross-chain functionality with one of our partners, LiFi, and the way that works is the credit never actually leaves the Polygon blockchain. What happens is that the user submits a request to retire that credit from, say, Solana. That request is then received on the Polygon blockchain. The credit is retired. And then that message is passed back to the Solana user. And so they get a link to the Polygon transaction hash. And so ultimately, the hard part of dealing with blockchains, with multiple blockchains, is propagating state from one to another. But with retirement of carbon credits, the retirement only needs to happen on one chain, and then you can simply pass a reference to that retirement event across to another chain to alleviate the concern around the same credit being retired on multiple chains.
Sounds like an opportunity there for those builders out there. But on this point, Victor, I think Victor has had a lot of experience with large industries, moving industries like shipping and maritime, right? And I'd love to hear from you. I mean, what you think could be some of the biggest challenges today in solving this problem, and how might you tackle this, and how Web3 could potentially be a solution?
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth, for the questions. And I think firstly was to explain what my lenses and my perspective come from. I'm with RHD Consulting Asia. We're actually a law firm. At the same time, we look at the regulations. And at that part of it, we actually invested in two firms in 2018 and 2019. And when we incubated that firm, we actually, it was called Air Carbon Exchange. And we listed, and we become the first Singapore exchange that was actually licensed. And after, we actually incubated another company that called Singapore Digital Asset Exchange that basically tokenized from buildings, assets, and actually comes to alternative assets. Little do we actually expect that, I think as time moved on, now in 2023, looking back, we actually can intersect both of it in digital tokenization as well as the carbon credit exchange. And that's where in this discussion we have, that this gives us opportunities now that we can actually have digital solutions in terms of traceability, in terms of trying to ensure some of these decentralized techniques and technologies could actually be used for good, and especially for sustainability. And sustainability is one of those that is actually decentralized across multiple farms, plantations, countries, cities, and very much carbon credits has not been standardized or regularized. And as it is, we saw there are multiple registries. So this part of it, where then spelled out quite a few issues that we looked at. At the exchange, we have multiple sellers who came to us, and a lot of times we actually have to look into double selling, or even where the credits are concerned, what are the authenticity of it, and whether it comes from a authenticated plantation or technology, science-based rule type of projects. So the investigation of it actually is very tedious. And secondly, I think sometimes we have encountered selling the carbon credits. It has been sold by two parties, but unless we cross-check with multiple registries, and this is very tedious, I think there are quite a lot of almost close to 50 over registries that we're still counting and still growing. And unless we check with them all, sometimes we didn't know, and the same could actually be sold. So having listed here as some of the challenges, Elizabeth's question was, what are these other challenges that we should have addressed in order to ensure that Web3 is able to shine in terms of a sustainability problem? I think there are three parts of things that I can think about. One, I think in terms of energy consumption, a lot of people actually knew about it. One of the issues about when it comes to the entire mining process, the crypto process, is very energy consuming. Even in Polygon, for last year, WWF UK was trying to actually launch something called the NFT's nature in February 2022. And when they were launching it, that was supposed to be for good. And Polygon actually is one of the second tier part of Ethereum protocol that is good enough that I think many of us who have seen that will be able to actually look into a lessen energy consumption. But nonetheless, there's so much perception issues that it came about from community. WWF actually shut down the entire program launch in 24 hours. So that's one part about the perception issues that we have to actually rectify. So of course, I think the proof of work that we saw in terms of mining has shifted to proof of stake. But nonetheless, I think how many of us here had actually in reality shifted? I think that's a question that we ask ourselves. A second part of things are this. In terms of decentralized technology, it does not mean decentralized power. In here, I think we all know that I think Web3 itself, decentralized technologies with blockchain, that probably is a great technology. But we also found, I think across the past few years, from Luna to Terra, and I guess very much we've seen many of these examples where the DAO process, the DAO process, when many of this power are rested within perhaps 90% of the entire owners or founders, that its ability to shine through by giving decentralized power to the rest of the community did not come true. And that's something to fix. And I guess at the law firm, we saw many of these companies who came to us in the Web3 projects. A lot of times, I think in the design of DAO or in the design of the power ownership process, many of them were actually designing in the process that the owners own part of the holistic part of it, and with very little process to the rest of the other community. And that's something to fix as a perception. And the third part, I think DeFi actually, or rather ReFi, it shines through consumerism. I think very much in here, when it comes to owning that carbon reduction, or able to actually NFTs a tree, or even to ensure that most of the farmers actually able to benefit from the process, because ultimately they are the one who actually in nature-based were to put the most resources and effort. I think very much of this, the consumerism process, to ensure most of the stakeholders at the bottom of the pyramid benefit from it. And if not, this will then become quite an academic discussion over and over again. And we see multiple projects in there, but with very little adoption.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. I think taking on that point of refi and being, or regeneration being a big consumer movement, I think Handprint, like, Simon, would you be able to share like some of that interesting work you're doing with corporates, with financial companies as well, to bring impact? I guess, potentially you were sharing some projects that you're working on, right? How regeneration finance is going into more of a consumer movement to the ground, or some challenges you can see coming up from that too.
Yeah, I can definitely say something about that. I think that if that's what you intended, Victor, that this trend that kind of regeneration or impact assets become kind of collectibles that consumers care about, for me is a good trend, right? So, and I think so. One of the products that we're rolling out in the next 6 weeks is a banking product that enables any bank in the world to integrate Handprint's capabilities for project sourcing, project monitoring, project reporting into the banking app as a sort of loyalty scheme. So for those familiar with Ant Forest within the Alipay ecosystem, we've basically built that kind of technology, with making it accessible to any bank in the world, with a view to banks that are interested in this, saying that we want to increase loyalty, increase barriers to switching as well, of course, and also attract new customers, especially in the Gen Z and also the millennial generation that care about this. But we all know how hard it is to switch banks. At least the perceived switching costs are very high. So as a consequence, banks are trying to figure out, like, how do we attract these kind of new customers? And by issuing a bank card that has a demonstrable and quantifiable positive impact on the world through the behavior of the customer, and then making project selection as well as project reporting accessible in the banking app, I think you can create a very powerful tool that is going to enhance loyalty and is going to make this kind of abstract concept of even carbon credits or impact, make that visible, make it tangible, make it part of the daily lived experience of the individual. And hopefully that in itself is going to lead to lots more awareness and just contributions that can solve these critical issues.
Thank you. And Marcus, too, could you also share, because I know KlimaDAO is actually a retail project and there's a lot of individuals who are onboarded onto the project. Can you share how that you're democratizing climate finance for investors?
Yeah. So when we launched, I think we really tapped into an unmet desire within the Web3 ecosystem to contribute to a positive impact. And ultimately, what we're trying to do with the on-chain carbon market that we're building, the digital carbon market that we're building, is to break down some of the barriers that have prevented both retail individuals as well as small and medium enterprises from accessing this important climate finance mechanism of carbon markets. As I was saying, that the minimum order sizes for placing an order through a broker are hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they won't take you seriously if you run a small accounting firm and you want to offset the 100 tons of business travel and operational emissions for your small business. There are a lot of larger, more traditional exchanges that have been spun up. You mentioned working with Air Carbon Exchange, and in order to open an account with one of these organizations, it's equivalent to opening a brokerage account or a bank account with pretty high minimums and often a large fee associated with opening the account. You contrast that with the program that we've set up on our marketplace, CarbonMark. Anybody with an internet connection can go to carbonmark.com, put in their credit card information, and buy anywhere from half a ton up to 1,000 tons or more. And so really what we're trying to enable there is both individuals to compensate for their own travel, to give to their children, as a gift. We ran a campaign last year called Love Letters to the Planet, where we invited our community to retire carbon and write a note onto the blockchain about why they wanted to support climate action. And so we had people retiring carbon for their children, for their family, for the future of the planet. And the idea there really is to galvanize this movement so that everyone feels the responsibility, and also to make it so that when companies are taking this action, they're using the same infrastructure that as individuals we're using. And it's not a sort of two-class system where the individual retail user has to go through a retailer that's going to bundle up their order with thousands of other people, whereas the big companies get direct access to the market. We really think that everyone should have access to this market.
Thank you. So, in the interest of time, I think we will be continuing on at 4 p.m. at the Mahogany Room at our Climate Saloon. And I'm sure you'll love to hear more from our speakers who will join us there. But key takeaway is that despite a lot of the challenges that you guys have shared, there are huge opportunities for Web3 and blockchain to shine in many areas, especially on the consumer front. And I hope to see you guys at 4 o'clock. Thank you.